and today we will talk about the parable of the growing seed. And he said, the kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed upon the ground, and should sleep and rise night and day, and the seed should sprout and grow. He knows not how. The earth produces of itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. But when the grain is ripe, at once he puts in the sickle, because the harvest has come. The parable of the growing seed is one of the parables that we don't often talk about. One of the reasons is that it can only be found in the Gospel of Mark. This parable has obvious similarities to the parable of the sower that we've discussed in one of our previous episodes, but it teaches a completely different principle. The kingdom of God that Christ illustrates here does not refer to an event that will happen after the second coming, but it actually talks about God's kingdom in its present spiritual manifestation, and its citizens function among men on the earth. In this parable, therefore, Jesus uses the natural process of plant growth to explain how those whom God calls develop spiritually in this world. The process is quite simple, paralleling to the growth of a seed into a full-grown plant. Just like the growth of a plant, it happens invisibly and somewhat mysteriously. The way one becomes spiritually mature is in a similar way. The spiritual process contains many parallels. For instance, it says that the sower sows the seed and goes his way, sleeping and rising, watching how things are going. But he really does not know how these things work. He knows that they happen, and he trusts that they will. The sower in this parable is not Christ, because we read, as if a man should scatter the seed upon the ground, but rather this sower is you and I, whom God uses to sow the seeds. Soon after it's sown, the seed sprouts due to the resources that God provides. At a certain time, He supplies the light, warmth, water, and nutrients, and the seed germinates. All that the sower does, he speaks a word, he writes an article, he preaches a sermon, shows kindness, or helps someone in need. The recipient is attracted by it, but it is God who does the bulk of the work. We're not aware of all the ways that God is working behind the scenes to bring a person to the knowledge of the truth. A Christian develops spiritually in the same way as we see in this analogy. God will use whatever method He chooses to get a person's attention. It might be something insignificant that we might not even think would catch anybody's eye. But in God's hand, it is sufficient to lead the individual to the truth. Like its physical counterpart, spiritual growth happens slowly and incrementally. We cannot expect a newborn Christian to be able to produce self-control as easily and to the same degree as one who has known God for several years. In the parable, Jesus compares the Christian to a growing seed, and no one expects a sprout to produce ripe fruit immediately. This process takes time and steady progress. In the illustration, the seed activated by water puts out roots and shoots. Continued use of those resources causes it to put on height, develop a head, display a flower, and eventually produce fruit. God could spend eternity supplying sun and water to the earth, but if the seed never responds to His blessings, not one sprout would ever break the soil surface. In the same way, God provides the knowledge, environment, energy, gifts, and whatever else is needed for a Christian to grow and produce spiritual fruit. But the Christian must consistently respond to God's providence to make them happen. A plant that does not respond well to what God supplies withers and dies, and so does improperly responsive Christian. Jesus addresses this in His parable of the sower, speaking of the seed that fell on the stony places and among thorns. These failed to grow due to tribulation and persecution, or the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches. as it was discussed in a few episodes back. In effect, they let external troubles and the stress of the living in this world halt the growth process. Such a Christian, Jesus says, stumbles or becomes unfruitful. A seed has been planted in our heart. At first, we might not see the results and get discouraged. But if we allow God to water and send sun, the seed will grow and will produce fruit that He is looking for and can harvest for His kingdom.